The light drizzle in Chicago transformed Michigan Avenue into a wet mirror reflecting the neon lights of the commercial buildings. Michael Anderson adjusted his Italian tie as he walked toward the elevator to the top floor of the building where he kept his office. The icy air conditioning of the corporate environment contrasted with the suffocating heat he felt inside, a sensation that had accompanied him like a persistent shadow for months. His cell phone vibrated incessantly in his suit pocket. Another postponed meeting, another dissatisfied investor, another promise of profits he needed to fulfill. Michael looked through the panoramic window and saw the city stretching as far as the eye could reach, millions of people chasing dreams that he no longer knew if they were his or someone else's he had once been. When his private driver approached, with the armored car, Michael made a gesture dismissing the service. The look of surprise on the employee's face mirrored the confusion he himself felt. He couldn't explain why he needed to walk, why he wanted to feel the cutting wind of the early morning hours passing through his expensive dress shirt, as if he needed to confirm that something still lived beneath the well-pressed suit. His footsteps echoed on the wet asphalt as he ignored the constant alerts from his phone. Million-dollar contracts, business mergers, performance reports that should be his top priority, but at that moment seemed as distant as stars on a cloudy night. Each step toward the wet concrete took him further from everything he had learned to value over the last 15 years of his career. The rain began to fall more heavily when he turned a random corner with no particular destination. It was then that his gaze locked onto a small figure, huddled on a cold bench at an almost deserted bus stop. From a distance, what seemed like just another abandoned package was, in fact, a boy of no more than 5 years old, covered by an adult's coat that slipped off his skinny shoulders. The boy's face was half buried between his knees, his messy hair stuck together from the moisture. Michael felt a strange discomfort, as if someone had squeezed his chest tightly. He could simply ignore it and move on, as he did daily with problems that weren't directly his. In the cold logic of numbers that he mastered, a child on the street wasn't a variable that fit into his spreadsheet of results, but something about that boy made him stop. Perhaps it was the way he breathed slowly, overcome by fatigue, or the almost invisible detail of a worn-out sneaker, soaked from accumulated puddles. The millionaire approached slowly without a smile, just observing, trying to understand how someone so small could endure so much cold without proper shelter. The boy awoke with the sound of wet gravel under expensive leather shoes. He raised his face slowly, revealing large, dark, curious eyes and in a way serene, as if he had already seen more than he should have for his age. There was no fear in that gaze, only a childlike curiosity mixed with a maturity that completely clashed with his 5 years of age. At that moment, something in Michael that he wouldn't know how to name broke a little, just enough to prevent him from turning his back and continuing to walk. The boy shifted on the wet bench, adjusting the large coat that served as an improvised blanket. "Don't you have a home to go to?" asked the boy with a hoarse voice, but without a tone of pleading. It was a simple, direct question that echoed in Michael's mind, much more profoundly than the words suggested. Michael was silent for a few seconds, processing the irony of the situation. He, who owned 3 apartments, 2 country houses, and a penthouse in the South Side, being asked by a child sleeping at a bus stop if he had a home to go to. The obvious answer would be yes, but for the first time in years he wasn't sure if those luxurious spaces could be called home. "And you?" he returned the question, crouching down to be at the boy's height. "Mom went to get food. She told me to stay here and not leave with anyone." The boy spoke naturally, as if sleeping on the street was the most normal thing in the world. "But she takes a long time sometimes. I keep waiting." The rain increased in intensity, transforming the drizzle into heavy drops that began to soak the small body even more. Michael looked around, searching for any sign of the child's mother, but the street was practically deserted. The watch on his wrist showed 2:15 in the morning. "How long have you been here?" he asked, taking off his own coat to cover the boy. "Since it got dark. Mom said she'd be back when the stores closed, but I think they closed a long time ago." Noah, as he introduced himself, accepted the coat without hesitation but kept his eyes fixed in the direction where he expected to see his mother appear. Michael sat on the wet bench, completely ignoring the fact that his suit cost more than 3 months' minimum wage. For the first time in years, the value of material things seemed irrelevant given the situation unfolding before him. "What's your name?" asked Noah, curious. "Michael. And shouldn't you be in school tomorrow?" "There's no school now. Mom said we're going to move to a new place and then I'll go to a new school." The boy spoke with hope in his voice, as if he truly believed that better days were coming. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just watching the rain create small rivers in the street gutters. Michael thought about his own childhood, when his mother worked double shifts as a nurse to ensure he never experienced cold or hunger. She passed away when he was only 16, but she had managed to build a solid foundation that allowed him to become the successful businessman he was today, or at least who he thought he was. "Michael," Noah called him softly, "do you have children?" The question hit a sensitive point that Michael had avoided touching for years. Marriages that ended because he prioritized work, relationships that fell apart because he couldn't connect emotionally with anyone. Children were always something for the future, a project that would be considered when the company was more stable, when profits were higher, when he had more time. "I don't," he answered simply. "It must be sad not to have anyone to take care of," commented Noah with the innocent wisdom of children. "I take care of Mom when she gets sad. She takes care of me when I have nightmares. It's good to have someone." These words echoed in Michael's mind like an echo that refused to disappear. He had employees, partners, acquaintances, but no one who took care of him when he was sad or whom he cared for in return. His life was a series of business transactions, signed contracts and met goals, but empty of genuine connections. The rain began to diminish when a female figure appeared at the corner, walking hurriedly toward the bus stop. She was a woman, probably in her early 20s, carrying a plastic bag and visibly worried. "Mom." Noah jumped from the bench, running to meet the woman who hugged him tightly, checking if he was okay. Michael observed the scene from the wet bench, feeling a twinge of something he couldn't identify. Perhaps it was longing for a time that never existed or envy of an unconditional love he had never experienced. The woman raised her eyes and saw him there, in his expensive suit and leather shoes, at a bus stop at 2:30 in the morning. The encounter that would change all their lives had just begun. Sarah held Noah by the shoulders, examining him with the eyes of a concerned mother. Her hands trembled slightly, not just from the cold, but from the anguish of having taken longer than she had promised. The plastic bag she carried contained only some day-old bread she had managed to get from a bakery that was closing, a small victory on a night of many defeats. "I'm sorry for the delay, my love. The line was long and I had to wait," she lied softly, running her hand through her son's wet hair. In truth, she had spent hours walking from establishment to establishment, looking for any work she could do that same night. Washing dishes, cleaning bathrooms, organizing inventory, anything that would earn a few dollars for breakfast the next day. It was then that her eyes turned to the man sitting on the bench. Michael was still there, observing the scene with an expression she couldn't decipher. The expensive suit was unmistakable, even wet from the rain. The Italian leather shoes, the watch that shone even under the dim streetlight, everything about him screamed money. But what intrigued her most was the way he looked at Noah, without pity, without disgust, only with genuine curiosity. "Mom, this is Michael. He stayed here with me waiting for you to come back," said Noah, pulling his mother's hand toward the man. "He gave me his coat when it started raining harder." Sarah then noticed that her son was wrapped in a high-quality men's coat, completely disproportionate to his size, but keeping him warm. She looked at Michael, who had stood up from the bench and was now standing, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but showing no rush to leave. "Thank you," she said simply, unable to hide the distrust in her voice. "You didn't have to stay." "I always come back." "I know," replied Michael, surprising himself with his own response. "He told me." There was an awkward silence between the two adults, while Noah played with the buttons on the coat he was wearing. Sarah studied the face of the man in front of her, looking for signs of ulterior motives, but found only fatigue and a loneliness that she recognized because she carried her own. "Do you live here?" asked Michael, immediately regretting how the question sounded. "We're going through a transitional phase," responded Sarah, raising her chin with pride. It wasn't a lie, technically. It was just a diplomatic way of saying they had lost their home 3 weeks ago and had been sleeping in public places ever since. Noah yawned loudly, reminding everyone that he was a child who should have been sleeping in a warm bed hours ago. Sarah looked around, assessing her limited options. The bus stop offered some protection from the rain, but it was no place for a child to spend the entire night, especially with the temperature dropping. "Is there somewhere you can go?" asked Michael, trying to sound casual, but genuinely concerned about the situation. "We do," Sarah lied again, squeezing her son's hand. "We were just waiting for the rain to stop." Michael knew it was a lie. 15 years of negotiating million-dollar contracts had taught him to read people, to identify when someone was bluffing or hiding information. But he also knew that insisting on the issue would be humiliating for this woman, who was clearly struggling to maintain dignity in an impossible situation. "Look, I know we don't know each other," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But it's very cold and he's too small to be on the street. There's a hotel right on the corner. You could stay there tonight at least until the weather improves." Sarah felt the blood rise to her face. It was exactly what she feared most, the pity of a rich stranger who thought he could solve her problems with money. She had been through this before: men who offered help expecting something in return, women who gave alms with an air of moral superiority. "We don't need your charity," she said firmly. "We manage on our own." "It's not charity," replied Michael, also feeling the tension rise. "It's a night at a hotel. It's not the end of the world." "For you, maybe not. For me, it means I can't take care of my own son." The words came out harsher than Sarah intended, but the wound was open and it hurt. Noah, sensing the tension between the adults, approached his mother and whispered something in her ear. Sarah bent down to hear better. "Mom, I'm really cold. And you're shivering too." The boy's voice was low but clear enough for Michael to hear. Sarah's heart broke a little more. She was putting her pride above her son's well-being, something she had sworn never to do. She looked at Michael, who waited in silence, not pushing, just waiting. "One night," she said finally, "just one night, and tomorrow I'll pay you back." "You don't need to pay anything," replied Michael. But he saw the expression on her face and quickly changed his mind. "I mean, you can pay when you can, there's no rush." They walked in silence to the small hotel on the corner. Michael spoke with the night receptionist, a sleepy man who didn't hide his judgment when he saw the disheveled family arriving at 3 in the morning. The payment was made discreetly, and Michael requested a room with 2 beds, breakfast included. "Number 237, said the receptionist, handing the key to Sarah. "Breakfast is served from 6 to 10. In the elevator, Noah held his mother's hand with one hand and Michael's with the other, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sarah observed the interaction and felt something strange stir in her chest. It had been so long since Noah had a male figure around, not since his father had left in search of work in the countryside and never returned. "Michael," said Noah, when they reached the floor, "are you going to stay in the room with us?" "No, Noah, I'm going home," he replied, returning the coat he had lent. "You all rest well, okay?" "Are you sure you don't want to stay?" "There are 2 beds, insisted the boy, genuinely concerned. Sarah felt her face warm. "Noah, don't bother the gentleman. He's already done a lot for us." "He's not bothering me," said Michael, smiling for the first time that night. "But I really need to go. I have a meeting early tomorrow." It was a lie. He didn't have any meeting. He had cancelled all the meetings for the past week, and his schedule was clear. But he didn't know how to explain that he wanted to stay, that for the first time in years he felt truly useful, not just profitable. "Thank you," said Sarah when he turned to leave. "For the kindness, for the night at the hotel, for taking care of him." "Thank you for letting me meet you," replied Michael, surprised at his own honesty. It's been a long time since I talked to someone for real. Noah waved from the door of the room until the elevator disappeared. Sarah put him inside and closed the door, leaning her back against the cold wood. The room was simple but clean, with 2 single beds, a small bathroom, and an old television. For Noah, it was a palace. "Mom, can I take a hot shower?" he asked, jumping with joy. "Of course, my love. Hot shower, food in the stomach, and a real bed. Today is our lucky day." While Noah bathed, Sarah sat on the bed and allowed herself to cry for the first time in weeks. Not from sadness, but from a relief so great that it seemed to want to empty all the fears she had accumulated. For a few hours at least, they would be safe. On the other side of the city, Michael drove through the empty streets toward his penthouse apartment. But for the first time in years, he felt no pleasure at all seeing the panoramic view of the city or stepping on the Italian marble of the living room. The house was empty, cold, silent, very different from the simple hotel room where he had left a mother and son who in a few hours had shown him a type of wealth he didn't know existed. He sat in the Swiss leather armchair, looking at the cell. Phone that had remained silent throughout the night. No corporate emergency, no problem that only he could solve. The world had continued to turn perfectly without him. For the first time, this didn't bother him. On the contrary, he felt free. The next morning, Michael woke up earlier than usual. The sun was still timidly breaking through the grey clouds of Chicago when he dressed in casual clothes for the first time in months. Dark jeans, simple white shirt, comfortable sneakers. He looked at himself in the mirror and found his own appearance strange. He looked younger, more human, less corporate. During his solitary breakfast in the penthouse, he couldn't stop thinking about what Sarah and Noah might be doing. If they had slept well, if Noah had enjoyed the hot shower, if Sarah had managed to rest a bit from her worries. These were new thoughts for him, who was used to waking up thinking about stock market actions and board meetings. He decided to stop by the hotel just to make sure they were okay. At least that's what he told himself. When he arrived at the lobby, he saw Noah playing with some paper cars he had made from newspaper sheets, while Sarah talked with the receptionist. The woman behind the counter didn't seem friendly, gesturing impatiently and pointing to a clock on the wall. "Good morning," said Michael, approaching. "Everything okay here?" "Michael!" Noah ran to greet him as if they were old friends. "You came back. I took a hot shower and Mom said we can have breakfast for free." Sarah turned and he noticed she was prettier than he had realized the night before. Her brown hair was clean and tied in a simple ponytail. She wore the same clothes, but there was a dignity in her posture that impressed him. "The lady was explaining the hotel rules," said Sarah, forcing a smile. "Apparently checkout time is at 10 in the morning. We were getting ready to leave." If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Michael looked at his watch. It was 8:45. "And where are you going?" he asked, directing the question to Sarah, but keeping his tone casual. "We're going to look for work," she replied, raising her chin. "Today is a new day, new opportunities." Michael admired her determination, but also felt a twinge of concern. He knew Chicago well enough to know that finding work without a fixed address, without recent references, and with a child to care for was almost impossible. "Can I have breakfast with you?" he asked. "I haven't eaten anything yet today." Noah clapped with joy, but Sarah hesitated. "We don't want to interfere with your plans." "I don't have plans," replied Michael, and for the first time in years, it was completely true. The hotel. Breakfast was simple: bread, butter, jam, coffee, and orange juice. But Noah ate as if it were a banquet, savoring each bite. Sarah ate little, more concerned with watching her son eat properly than satisfying her own hunger. "Sarah," said Michael, finishing his coffee, "if you don't mind me asking, what kind of work are you looking for?" "Anything honest," she promptly replied. "I know how to cook, clean, take care of children. I've worked in restaurants, offices, family homes. I'm not picky." "Mom made the best chocolate cake in the city," added Noah, proud. "She worked in a really big bakery, but then it closed." Sarah felt her eyes water. The job at the bakery had been the best she'd ever had. Fixed hours, decent salary, family environment. When it closed because of the pandemic, it took with it not only her source of income, but also a piece of the stability she had built for Noah. "You like cooking?" asked Michael, genuinely interested. "I love it. I've always loved it. Since I was little, I'd be in the kitchen with my grandmother learning family recipes. She used to say that cooking is an act of love, that when you prepare food for someone, you're sharing a piece of your soul." There was a passion in Sarah's voice that Michael rarely heard when people talked about work. For him, work had always been about results, profits, competition, never about love. "And you, Michael?" asked Noah, curious. "What do you do?" Michael hesitated. How to explain to a 5-year-old child that he spent his days moving numbers from one place to another, buying and selling companies as if they were chess pieces? "I work with business." "What kind of business?" insisted Noah, with the infinite curiosity of children. "I help companies grow. I buy, sell, invest in things that can make a profit." "Are you rich?" asked Noah, without malice, just curiosity. "Noah," Sarah reprimanded, embarrassed. "You don't ask people that." "It's okay," said Michael, smiling. "I have money, Noah. More than I need, actually." "Then why did you look so sad last night?" asked the boy, leaving both adults without an answer. Michael was silent for a moment, processing the question. How had a 5-year-old child managed to see something that he himself refused to admit? "Sometimes having money isn't enough to be happy," he answered honestly. "Sometimes we feel alone even if we have many things." "But you're not alone now," said Noah, smiling. "You're with us." The simplicity of the statement hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. The boy was right. At that moment, sitting at a simple hotel table eating bread with butter, he didn't feel alone. He felt something he hadn't experienced in years: belonging. "Look, Sarah," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" she asked, immediately suspicious. "Nothing compromising, I promise. It's just that I have some ventures in the city, and I always need reliable people to help. You said you know how to cook, take care of children, clean. I'm sure I can find something that fits your skills." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs that he was just another person wanting to take advantage of her situation. But she found only sincerity. "What kind of job?" she asked cautiously. "Let me think about it more and give you a more concrete answer. But for now, how about you stay a few more days at the hotel, just until we organize everything properly?" "I can't accept more charity," said Sarah firmly. "It's not charity, it's an investment. I'm investing in a person who I believe can make a difference. You pay everything back when you start working." Noah looked from one adult to the other, feeling the tension in the air, but not completely understanding what was happening. He only knew that he liked Michael, that the man had been kind to him and his mother, and that for the first time in a long time, Mum didn't seem worried. "Can I think about it?" asked Sarah. "Of course. There's no rush. You can stay at the hotel. Today, think calmly. We'll talk again tomorrow." "Will you come back tomorrow?" asked Noah, hopeful. "If you want me to," replied Michael, looking at Sarah. "We want," said Noah before his mother could respond. Sarah sighed but smiled. "All right, we'll talk again tomorrow." Michael stood up from the table, took his wallet, and left some bills to cover the bill, plus a generous tip. "Until tomorrow, then." "Michael," Sarah called when he was walking away, "thank you for everything." "Thank you for letting me be part of your day," he replied, smiling. Noah waved animatedly until Michael disappeared through the hotel door. Sarah watched him leave, feeling a mixture of gratitude and confusion. There was something about that man that intrigued her. He was clearly rich, successful, but there was also a loneliness in him that she recognized. A hunger for genuine connection that money couldn't satisfy. "Mom, I like him," said Noah, interrupting her thoughts. "I do too, my love," she admitted, surprising herself with her own honesty. "I do too." At that moment, neither Sarah nor Michael knew they were about to embark on a journey that would change their lives forever. A journey that began at a wet bus stop, but would lead them to discover that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them. and that love can flourish in the most unlikely places. Michael spent the rest of the day wandering through the city as he had never done before. He had no destination, no agenda, no hurry. For the first time in 15 years, he was free to simply exist. He walked through the historic downtown, observed street artists, sat in squares he knew only by name, ate a sandwich in a simple diner where he would never have entered before. Everything seemed different when he wasn't in a hurry to get somewhere. Important. People had faces, streets had personality, the city had soul. How had he lived so long in Chicago without really seeing it? In the late afternoon, he found himself in a region he rarely visited, a lower middle-class residential neighborhood, with small houses, local businesses, and a community life he didn't know. It was there that he saw a "For Rent" sign on a small building that seemed to have been a cafe. Curiosity made him approach. Through the dusty windows, he could see a cozy space with small tables, a wooden counter, a kitchen that, even empty, still held the warmth of better times. There was something about that place that attracted him, a feeling that there were stories to tell there. He noted the phone number from the sign and called immediately. "Hello?" Answered a female voice on the other end. "Good afternoon. I'm calling about the commercial property for rent on Oak Street." "Oh, yes. Are you interested? I can show it right now if you'd like." 15 minutes later, Michael was walking through the small space alongside Mrs. Rose, a friendly lady of approximately 60 years who had owned the cafe for almost 20 years. It was the family cafe, she explained, running her hand affectionately over the wooden counter. "My husband and I built all this from scratch. Coffee in porcelain cups, homemade bread, cakes that had lines out the door. But after he passed away, it became difficult to maintain alone." "I'm sorry," said Michael, genuinely touched by the sadness in her voice. "Don't worry, dear. They were good years. A lot of joy passed through here. Now I just want to see this place come back to life, you know. I can't stand seeing it empty anymore." Michael looked around, imagining how the space would be functioning. He could almost hear the sound of conversations, smell the aroma of fresh coffee, visualize families having breakfast together, people meeting for a conversation about life. "How much is the rent?" he asked. $2,000, includes basic. Water and electricity. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive for what it offers. The kitchen is fully equipped. The tables and chairs stay, and there's even a small apartment on the second floor. Apartment. Yes, it's small, but it had everything a family needed. We lived there in the first years. 2 bedrooms, bathroom, living room and kitchen. I was thinking of renting it separately, but it might interest you together. Michael couldn't explain what he felt, but there was something about that place that made sense, as if it were a puzzle piece that fit perfectly into something he didn't even know he was looking for. "I'll take it," he said, surprising himself. Just like that, without thinking, without seeing the papers, without negotiating, asked Mrs. Rose, surprised. "I trust you, and the place is perfect for what I have in mind." "May I ask what you intend to do here?" Michael smiled, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "I think I'm going to bring life back to this place exactly as you would like." That night, Michael dined alone in the apartment, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel lonely. He was anxious, excited, full of plans. He took a sheet of paper and began to write ideas, draw layouts, imagine possibilities. When he realized it was almost midnight, and he had filled several sheets with plans for the cafe. A menu with homemade dishes, operating hours that would serve families with children, space for small community events. Everything revolved around a central idea, creating a place where people would feel at home. The next morning, he returned to the hotel with more energy than he had felt in months. He found Sarah and Noah having breakfast, and immediately noticed that she seemed more rested, more hopeful. "Good morning," he greeted, sitting at the table. "Good morning, Michael," replied Noah, excited. "Mom said today you were going to tell us about the job." "That's right," said Michael, looking at Sarah. "Actually, I have a better proposal than I imagined yesterday." "I'm listening," she said, curious. "How about if I told you by showing you?" Can you come with me to see a place I rented yesterday?" "You rented a place?" asked Sarah, surprised. "For us," said Noah, clapping his hands. "It's not quite like that, Noah," Michael laughed. "But it is a special place. I think you'll like it." The journey to the cafe was full of expectation. Noah stuck to the car window, watching the neighborhoods change as they moved away from downtown. Sarah was silent, but Michael could tell she was nervous. "Sarah, are you worried about something?" he asked during the trip. "It's just that I'm not used to people being kind without wanting something in return," she admitted. "I'm trying to understand your motivations." "My motivations are simple," replied Michael honestly. "For the first time in years, I found something that makes sense, something that can make a difference in people's lives, not just in my profit." "And what is that?" "You'll see." When they arrived at the cafe, Mrs. Rose was already waiting. With the keys, Michael made the introductions and opened the door for them to enter. "Wow!" exclaimed Noah, running through the empty space. "It's like a castle." Sarah entered slowly, observing every detail. The professional kitchen, the wooden counter, the large windows that let in natural light. There was something familiar about that place, as if she'd been there before. "It's a cafe," she said, more to herself than to the others. "It was a cafe," corrected Michael. "And it can be again." Sarah looked at him, beginning to understand. "You're offering for me to work here?" "I'm offering for you to run it. It would be your kitchen, your menu, your vision. I would enter only as a silent investor." "Run it?" she repeated, incredulous. "You said you love cooking, that cooking is an act of love. This place needs someone who understands that, someone who can give it back the soul it once had." Sarah walked to the kitchen, ran her hand over the equipment, imagined herself preparing meals there. She could almost smell the aroma of fresh bread, the warmth of the oven, the satisfaction of seeing people savoring her food. "I don't have experience running a business," she said, insecure. "I do," replied Michael. "I can take care of the administrative part, the accounts, the suppliers. You take care of what you know how to do best, creating experiences that feed not just the body, but the soul." "Mom, there's an apartment upstairs," shouted Noah, who had discovered the stairs leading to the second floor. "Apartment?" asked Sarah. "It's small but functional. You could live there if you wanted. It would be more practical, and Noah would be close to the school that's here on the street." Sarah felt tears coming. It was everything she had dreamed of, but never dared to ask for. An opportunity to start over, a place to call home, a job she truly loved. "Why are you doing this?" she asked with a choked voice. "Because you two showed me that there is a different life than the one I was living. Because Noah made me realize that I was alone, even having everything. Because you made me remember that work can be about love, not just about profit." Sarah looked around once more, imagining the possibilities. "And if it doesn't work out? Then we try again, as many times as necessary. Can I think about it?" "Of course. But while you think, how about if you stayed in the apartment for a few days, just to test if you liked the place?" Noah came running down the stairs. "Mom, there's a real bed up there and a window where you can see the park." Sarah looked at her son, radiant with happiness, and knew there wasn't much to think about. Sometimes when life offers a second chance, you simply need to have the courage to accept it. "All right," she said, smiling. "Let's try." What neither of them knew was that that decision would change not only their lives, but also the lives of dozens of other people who would soon discover that the small cafe on Oak Street was much more than a place to eat. It was a place where dreams were reborn. 3 weeks later, the cafe had completely transformed. The walls gained color, the tables were reorganized to create cozy corners, and the aroma of fresh bread and freshly brewed coffee returned to perfume the air. Sarah worked from dawn, preparing homemade cakes, artisanal sandwiches, and dishes that carried the flavor of family recipes. Noah attended the local school in the morning and spent the afternoons helping in the cafe, organizing napkins, greeting customers, and being spoiled by all the regulars. The boy had become the mascot of the place, conquering hearts with his contagious joy. Michael discovered that managing a cafe was completely different from managing an investment company. It wasn't just about numbers and profits, but about people, relationships, community. He spent his days transitioning between conversations with suppliers, menu planning with Sarah, and precious moments helping Noah with his homework. "Michael, can you help me with math?" asked Noah one afternoon, climbing onto his lap while he checked the cafe's accounts. "Sure, champ, what don't you understand? The teacher said that 2 plus 2 is 4, but I think 2 plus 2 can be much more than that." "What do you mean?" asked Michael, curious. "Like if you take 2 hugs and add 2 smiles, you have a happy family. That's much more than 4, isn't it?" Michael felt his heart tighten. The boy's simple wisdom never ceased to surprise him. "You're right, Noah. Some things can't be measured just with numbers. Are you part of our family now?" asked Noah, looking directly into his eyes. The question caught Michael completely off guard. He looked at Sarah, who was organizing the kitchen, and felt something he had never experienced before. The deep desire to belong, to be part of something bigger than himself. "I would like to be," he answered, honestly. "Then you are," said Noah, as if it were the simplest thing in the Sioux world. That night, after Noah went to sleep, Michael and Sarah sat in the small living room of the apartment to talk about the cafe's traffic. In recent days, it had become a ritual, reviewing the day, planning the next, sharing small victories and concerns. "Customers are loving the chocolate cake," commented Sarah, leafing through the notebook where she wrote down special orders. "Of course they are." "Noah was right when he said it was the best in the city," replied Michael, smiling. "You've changed a lot since we met," observed Sarah, studying his face. "For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better. You seem more human." Michael laughed. "Thanks, I guess. It's not a joke. You seem more connected with yourself, more present. Before I had the impression that you were always thinking about something else, somewhere else." "That's because now I have a place where I want to be," he said, looking directly into her eyes. The silence that followed was charged with a different tension. Not the tension of discomfort, but the tension of mutual attraction that both had been trying to ignore in recent weeks. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. "Michael," Sarah began hesitantly, "what's happening between us?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know I've never felt this way before." "Me neither, and that scares me." "Why does it scare you?" Sarah stood up, walking to the window. "Because you might leave. You have a life, a company, a world that is completely different from mine, and I can't afford the luxury of falling in love with someone who might disappear." "Who said I'm leaving?" asked Michael, standing up as well. "Your family, your partners, your life from before, all of that will demand your return sooner or later." As if it were a premonition, Michael's cell phone began to ring. It was his father, Richard Anderson, calling for the 10th time that week. Michael had ignored all previous calls. "Answer it," said Sarah, noticing the tension on his face. "It might be important," Michael answered, going out to the balcony for privacy. The conversation was brief but intense. Sarah could hear him raising his voice, clearly upset about something. "Problems?" she asked when he returned. "My father wants me to return to the company, says I'm playing cafe while serious business is abandoned." "And are you going back?" "I don't know. I don't want to. But it's complicated." "Complicated how?" Michael sighed, running his hand through his hair. "It's a family business. My father built everything from scratch, and I was always the natural heir. He's getting older, needs someone reliable to continue the legacy." "And you don't want to continue?" "Not the way he wants, not anymore." Michael looked around at the cafe they had built together, at the life they had created. "Here I found something that really matters. But your family won't understand that." "Probably not." Sarah felt her heart tighten. She had been through this before, when Noah's father promised he would return from the countryside and never gave any more news. Men who made promises they couldn't keep, who chose other priorities when the pressure increased. "Maybe you should talk to him," she said, trying to sound disinterested. "Sarah, look at me," asked Michael, noticing the change in her tone. "Nothing has changed. I don't want to go back to that life. But you have responsibilities, a company, employees, a future that was already mapped out. And what about you, and Noah, and what we built here? Isn't that responsibility too? Sarah turned to him, her eyes shining with contained tears. Michael, you saved me, saved both of us, but I can't be the reason for you to abandon your family. It's not abandonment, it's choice. It's the same thing. They remained silent, the weight of reality hovering over them. What had begun as a gesture of charity had transformed into something much deeper and more complex. True love, but also a dilemma that seemed impossible to resolve. I'll schedule lunch with my father, Michael finally said. I'll try to explain to him what's happening here. And if he doesn't understand, then we'll have to find a way to make it work anyway. Sarah nodded, but deep in her heart knew it wouldn't be so simple. She knew well the pressure of family, the weight of expectations, the strength of traditions. She had seen other men succumb to these pressures, choosing the easier, more expected path. That night, lying in bed, she heard Noah breathing peacefully in the room next door. Her son had found the stability she had always dreamed of for him. School, home, a father figure who truly loved him. Would it be selfish of her to want more? Would it be fair to risk everything for a love that might not be strong enough to overcome the differences in class and family? On the other side of the city, Michael also couldn't sleep. For the first time in weeks, he returned to the penthouse apartment, but the place seemed cold and lifeless. To him, he sat in the leather armchair looking at the panoramic view of the city, but all he could think about was the small apartment above the cafe where Sarah and Noah slept. The next day, lunch with his father was a disaster. Richard Anderson not only didn't understand his son's motivations, but felt offended by the idea that Michael might prefer playing cafe to taking over the empire he had built. "You're being manipulated by this woman," said his father bluntly. "She saw an opportunity to take advantage of you and is doing exactly that." "That's not true," replied Michael, controlling his anger. "Sarah isn't like that. They all are when it comes to rich men. You need to stop this fantasy and return to reality. The reality is that I'm happy for the first time in years. Happiness is a luxury, Michael. Responsibility is what matters." The conversation ended badly, with Richard giving his son an ultimatum: either return to the company immediately or be disinherited. Michael left the restaurant knowing he had reached a point of no return. When he returned to the cafe, he found Sarah serving the last customer of the day, the smile that always greeted him replaced by a worried expression. "How did it go?" she asked. "Complicated," he replied. "Very complicated." "Michael, I've been thinking," she began hesitantly. "Maybe it's better if you go back to your life. I don't want to be responsible for you losing your family." Sarah, no. "Listen, it was wonderful while it lasted. You gave us a chance to start over, and for that I'll be eternally grateful. But maybe it's time for you to go back to where you belong." "I belong here," he said firmly. "You belong to the world of business, important meetings, million-dollar contracts, not to the world of small cafes and simple families. Who decides where I belong is me. No, Michael, that's not how it works. There are forces greater than us, expectations we can't simply ignore." That night, for the first time since they met, they went to sleep without resolving the tension between them. And for the first time, Michael began to understand that love, no matter how true it might be, wasn't always enough to overcome all the barriers that life placed in the way. A week passed since the tense conversation between Michael and Sarah. The cafe continued to function, but there was a different atmosphere in the air. Michael still appeared every day, but the conversations were more formal, more distant. Sarah concentrated on work, trying to ignore the pain she felt in her chest every time she looked at him. Noah, with the sensitivity of children, perceived that something had changed. He constantly asked why Michael was sad, why Mom didn't smile as much as before, why they no longer had dinner together in the apartment. "Mom, doesn't Michael like us anymore?" asked Noah one morning, as he was getting ready for school. "Of Course he does, my love. It's just that he has other commitments now. But he promised he would teach me to ride a bike this weekend. Sarah felt her heart tighten. This was exactly what she feared most, Noah becoming attached to Michael and then being abandoned. She herself had made that mistake, allowing her feelings to grow beyond what she could control. Sometimes people make promises they can't keep, Noah. It's not because they don't want to. It's because life is complicated. But he promised, insisted Noah with the innocent stubbornness of children. That afternoon, as Sarah was preparing a birthday cake for one of the regular customers, Michael arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. He seemed agitated, nervous, carrying a folder of documents. "Can we talk?" he asked, looking around to make sure there were no customers nearby. "Sure. What happened?" "My father came to visit me this morning, at the office." Sarah stopped mixing the cake batter, sensing bad news was coming. "And?" "He brought the company, transfer papers, said if I don't sign by the end of the week, he's going to sell everything to a competitor." "My God, Michael, and are you going to sign?" "I don't know. Everything is very confused in my head." Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and turned to him. "Michael, you need to think about your future, your financial security. You can't just throw everything away." "It's not throwing away. It's making a choice. A choice that could leave you with nothing." With nothing. Michael approached her, speaking softly, but with intensity. "Sarah, you and Noah are everything to me. How is that nothing?" "Because love doesn't pay bills. Because love doesn't guarantee that you won't regret it 5 years from now. Because love isn't enough when reality knocks at the door." "Since when did you become so cynical?" "Since I learned that men like you don't stay with women like me. Not in the real world." The words came out harsher than Sarah intended, but she couldn't control them. All the pain, all the frustration, all the fear she had accumulated in recent weeks exploded at that moment. Michael was silent for a long time, processing what he had heard. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but determined. "So that's it, you're giving up on us?" "I'm not giving up, I'm being realistic." Realistic would be fighting for what we feel for each other. Realistic is recognizing that we live in different worlds and that this won't change just because we fell in love. Noah chose exactly that moment to come running down the stairs, interrupting the tense conversation between the two adults. "Michael, you came early today. Want to see the drawing I made at school?" "Sure, champ," replied Michael, forcing a smile. "Show me." Noah ran to fetch the drawing, leaving Michael and Sarah alone again, but the child's presence had completely changed. The atmosphere. "He loves you," said Sarah, watching Noah return with the paper in hand. "I love him too. I love both of you." "I know, but sometimes love isn't enough." Noah came running back, proudly showing a drawing where he, Michael, and Sarah appeared as a family, holding hands in front of the cafe. "Look, I drew the 3 of us. We're a family, right?" Michael looked at the drawing, then at Sarah, and something resolved inside him. A clarity he hadn't felt before, a certainty that cut through all the doubts and fears. "Noah, can you go play upstairs for a few minutes? I need to talk to your mom." "Okay, but afterward, will you help me with my homework?" "Afterward, I'll help you with your homework," promised Michael, messing up the boy's hair. When Noah disappeared up the stairs, Michael turned to Sarah with a determination she hadn't seen before. "Sarah, I need to tell you something about why my father really wants me to return to the company." "What do you mean?" "The company is in trouble, serious trouble. Some investments went wrong, some partners left, and now he desperately needs someone to take control and save what's left. So you really do need to go back." "No, I don't need to, because yesterday I discovered something that changes everything." Michael opened the folder he had brought and showed Sarah some documents. "I hired an independent accountant to analyze the company's finances. You know what he discovered? That my father has been hiding debts for years. That the company he so wants me to sign for is practically bankrupt." "Michael, no." "Yes, and you know what else? He knew I was happy here, that I had found something that really mattered and still tried to drag me back to that dishonest life. Sarah was silent, processing the information. "But there's more," continued Michael. "I don't need the company to be happy. I don't need its money, I don't need its status, I don't need anything from it, because in the last few months I discovered that true wealth isn't in a bank account." "Michael, don't talk like that, you're being emotional." "I'm being honest. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely honest. I love you, Sarah. I love you and I love Noah. You are my family, and I'm going to fight for you. And if the money runs out, and if the cafe doesn't work out, and if everything works out," interrupted Michael, "and if we're happy together, and if we build a life worth living?" Sarah felt the tears come. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been so sure of anything in my life." "But your family?" "My true family is here. You and Noah. The rest are just people who share my last name." Sarah looked at the man in front of her, seeing for the first time not the rich businessman who had helped her, but the man who had chosen a different life, a life with her, a man who was willing to give up everything for love. "Sarah," said Michael, approaching slowly, "will you marry me?" "What?" "I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for a short time, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life waking up in the apartment above the cafe, watching you, prepare wonderful cakes, helping Noah with his homework and building a life that has meaning." "Michael, you don't have to answer now, just think about the possibility. Think about us being a real family." Sarah looked around, at the cafe they had built together, at the photos Noah had glued to the wall, at the life they had created in recent months. It wasn't a life rich in money, but it was rich in love, in meaning, in purpose. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with her own response. "Yes? Yes, I will marry you. I accept building a family with you. I accept risking everything for love." Michael took her in his arms, spinning her in the air as they both laughed and cried at the same time. Noah, who had heard the entire conversation from the top of the stairs, came running down and joined the hug. "So now we're a real family?" he asked, looking from one to the other. "We are a real family," confirmed Michael, kissing the boy's forehead. "And will you teach me to ride a bike?" "I'll teach you to ride a bike, play soccer, swim, drive, and everything else you want to learn." "Do you promise?" "I promise. And this time, it's a promise I'm going to keep." 6 months later, Michael and Sarah married in a simple ceremony, held at the cafe itself with all the regular customers and the local community present. Noah was the ring bearer, proud of the new family he had helped create. Richard Anderson did not attend the wedding, but sent a card wishing the couple happiness. Perhaps with time he would understand that sometimes the best decisions are those that the heart makes, not the head. The cafe prospered, becoming a meeting point for the community, a place where people went not just to eat but to feel at home. Michael discovered that using his business knowledge to help small local businesses was infinitely more rewarding than moving millions in the financial market. Sarah realized the dream of being the chef of her own restaurant, creating dishes that were true works of art, seasonings that told stories, flavors that created memories. Noah grew up surrounded by love, security, and the certainty that family is not just about blood, but about choice and commitment. And every night, when they closed the cafe and went up to the small apartment they called home, the three of them sat at the table to have dinner together, knowing they had found something that all the money in the world couldn't buy, a true love that transformed 3 lonely lives